Have you ever wondered why some people just have to break the rules, while others find comfort in cleaning when they're stressed? We tend to judge these habits at face value, but what if I told you they're all just different languages for the same hidden psychological code? Today, we're going to decode the really surprising reasons behind the habits we see every single day.
All right, so let's jump in with a question that kind of sounds like a riddle, right? What on earth could a rule breaker and a total neat freak possibly have in common? I mean, they seem like they're from completely different planets.
Well, believe it or not, the answer is pretty fascinating. It turns out that these two behaviors, which look like polar opposites, are actually just different strategies to satisfy the exact same, really powerful underlying human need. And that gets us to our first major theme, this invisible but incredibly powerful drive for control that quietly shapes so much of what we all do. So what do we actually mean by psychological control? Now, your brain might immediately go to control freak, but that's not it. This is way more fundamental. It's the basic human need to feel like you're in the driver's seat of your own life. It's our brain's go-to defense against a world that's often stressful and, totally unpredictable.
And here is where it gets really interesting. That one single need for control can show up in completely opposite ways. So, on one hand, the rule breaker resists any control put on them from the outside. They see rules as a threat to their freedom. But on the other hand, the cleaner creates control in their own little world. When life feels out of control, organizing a closet is a way to create a small pocket of order. It's two totally different actions, all coming from that same shared drive.
This quote just nails the rule breaker's mindset perfectly. For them, it's not about winning or losing. It's about how you play the game. The feeling of making your own choices, that autonomy, is way more important than the final outcome. Seriously, succeeding by following someone else's playbook doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like you gave up a piece of yourself.
So let's build on that. Our next big idea is that a lot of our habits go beyond just control. They're about reinforcing who we think we are. Our actions kind of become the script we follow to perform our own identity. Just look at how this works. For the person who's always jumping in to fix things, they're not just solving a problem. They're proving to themselves, my worth comes from being useful. The rule breaker isn't just trying to be annoying, they're living out their identity as an independent thinker. And that person who seems to freeze up right before a huge success, well, their whole identity might be built around the struggle, not the win. Let's zoom in on the fixer for a second. For this person, being the one who can solve problems isn't just a skill they have, it's the absolute core of their self-worth. It's who they are. So you can imagine, when there's nothing broken to fix, they can actually start to feel pretty lost. And you can see this internal cycle they go through. First, some kind of chaos pops up. Instantly, they feel this intense internal pressure to be the one who makes it right, and it doesn't matter if anyone even asked them to. Then, when they solve it, boom. That action validates their identity, it gives their self-worth a huge boost, and the whole cycle is ready to start all over again.
Now, what about that person who overthinks success? This one's a real trip. You'd think they're afraid of failure, right? But it's not that at all. Deep down, they're afraid that if they actually succeed, they won't be the same person anymore. They'll lose that identity they've built around being the underdog, the one who's always on the journey. For them, success isn't a finish line, it's the end of their story. And that is genuinely terrifying.
All right, so we've got control and we've got identity. For a third theme, let's look at how some habits aren't really choices at all. They're unconscious strategies our brains use to help us escape psychological pain.
And the key concept here is the coping mechanism. The easiest way to think about this is that it's a tool your brain uses automatically, without you even thinking about it, just to manage stress and keep you from feeling completely overwhelmed. Let's take a modern example. You ever notice how some people just sort of fade away from social media? There's no big "I'm leaving" announcement. They just stop posting. A lot of times, that's not a big dramatic decision. It's more of a subconscious move their brain makes to protect them from that low-grade, constant hum of discomfort these platforms can create. Because think about all the stuff running in the background when we're scrolling. There's this constant subconscious comparison game happening. We're getting blasted with more information than our brains can handle. Maybe we get a little too dependent on likes for a quick hit of validation. After a while, your brain just gets tired. So stepping away isn't about thinking you're too good for it. It's an act of pure mental self-preservation.
And this brings us right back around to cleaning. When your mind is just a chaotic mess of anxiety, cleaning is a perfect coping mechanism. Why? Because you get to take that internal, tangled-up feeling and channel it into a simple, physical task that is a clear beginning and end. Look, you can't easily organize your anxious thoughts, but you absolutely can organize your bookshelf, and that provides a very, very real sense of relief.
So let's pull all these threads together. We've seen how this need for control, this search for identity, and this urge to escape discomfort are the hidden engines driving our habits. So what does it all mean when you put it together?
This slide, this is basically the decoder ring. We see the rule breaker and our first thought is, they're just being difficult. But the real driver? A deep need for autonomy. We call the fixer a control freak, when really, their self-worth is literally tied to being useful. We see the person who's always cleaning as obsessed, but often it's just a way to cope with stress. Every single one of these behaviors has its own hidden logic once you know how to look for it.
And really, that's the whole takeaway here. When we can manage to stop judging the behavior we see on the surface and instead get curious about what's driving it underneath, well, that's where real understanding and real empathy can finally begin.
So I'm going to leave you with this question. Thinking about it through this lens of control, identity, and comfort. Which one of your own habits, or maybe a habit of someone you know, suddenly makes a whole lot more sense?